Welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Jason Gilbo, JGilbo11. With me is Nick Tasso at The Inefficient 2, taking a look at pitching on DraftKings and FanDuel for the Monday slate. And we got some top options here. I think it's a pretty good wide range. Got an intriguing GPP option making his MLB debut. So kind of a lot going on here.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of avenues to really go down with this slate. And there's, like you said, a few top pitchers, and then you have a couple middle of the road, which you could play. And there's a lot of good matchups, unlike a couple of times ago when we spoke, when it was absolutely no safe options.
Yeah, it seems like it's been a while since we've kind of dug in, you and I, into a good slate. So finally.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taken long enough.
Yeah. I mean, this first one here is not going to really jump out of us as far as pitching goes, but Orioles and Rockies. It's in Baltimore. Giovanni Gallardo, Jorge De La Rosa. I know Jorge De La Rosa has been better since coming back from that kind of DL bullpen stint that he pulled off about a month ago. But neither of these guys are obviously intriguing options.
No, absolutely not. The only thing I would think of would maybe be De La Rosa in GPPs on DraftKings, just because he has had 3 straight road starts where he's had 3 runs or less, gone at least 7 or 6 innings in each of those starts, and he's actually been pretty serviceable, so I wouldn't mind him here. It's obviously not an ideal matchup, but you never know if you could plug away a couple innings here or there, and you could rack up a decent amount of fantasy points only at 4,000, so I don't mind him.
I mean, he's only 4K, and you look at these Baltimore bats, I mean, against lefties, they really haven't been that great. 25th in WOBA. I mean, obviously there are some right-handers in this lineup that you need to worry about, but, I mean, at this point in the season, it seems like everyone's kind of hitting righties more so than lefties.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you plug him in there 4,000 and even take another stud, you still have a lot of salary to add up to fill out a roster, so he's kind of an intriguing play, but definitely not safe by any means.
Yeah, and as far as Gallardo goes, I mean, I know the Rockies are outside of Coors, but I mean, it's obviously not like Camden Yards as a pitcher park. So I think with that short right field and just at this ballpark in general, I think you got to look at Gallardo and feel pretty comfortable kind of using bats against him.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, Gallardo he allows too many base runners. He walks a lot of guys, and it just leads to bad innings for him and short outings. So I'm staying away from him, and I agree with you. I think the Rockies could still do a lot of damage against him.
Yeah, and Blue Jays Padres next one here. You got Aaron Sanchez versus Colin Rea, and Sanchez an intriguing option, a little more expensive, but I think given his his play at times this year has definitely been deserving of it. A little more so on DraftKings where he's priced a lot higher than maybe you'd like. But I think in the matchup, he's done a little bit worse at home. But I think just given the Padres, and obviously they've shown some life, really over the last month or so, but still not a good offense, and you can kind of feel comfortable targeting against them.
Yeah, I actually don't mind Sanchez just because he's been doing pretty well lately. He's cash game viable for me. I don't think there's much upside for GPPs, but he's going to get you that solid floor. Over his past 6 starts, he's allowing no more than 2 runs per start, 1.80 ERA, and we've seen how Padres bats really they've had some struggles at times. I think they're slowly turning it around, but I still think Sanchez should have a pretty good outing. The reason why I don't like him in GPP is just because he doesn't have a high strikeout potential, so he'll really limit his ceiling.
Yeah, I mean, I think I could see, possibly using him in GPPs. I mean, maybe just because the Padres do strike out a little bit more, I think it kind of could balance it out. Overall, Sanchez does have kind of an average strikeout rate, nothing really too impressive. But given the matchup, I might take a stab at him in GPPs just because it's nearly 25% for the Padres against right-handed pitching.
No, I definitely see your point there. Just for me, I'm just not 100% sold that he could get all those strikeouts.
As far as Ray on the other side, yes, he's cheap, but there's no way for me to justify using him here in a tough matchup against the Jays.
He is over 5.5 ERA on the road, so I'm definitely staying away from him here. It's a terrible matchup.
Yeah. Phillies Marlins next here, Jeremy Hellickson versus Jarred Cozart. And Cozart, he's the one I feel maybe I could take a cheap stab at as an SP2 on DK, just because he is under 5K. Obviously, he hasn't pitched much this season. He's coming back from the DL. The one thing that'd be kind of concerning for me is just given that he might be on some sort of a pitch count. But I guess at that price, like if he can get you 5 to 6 innings and can pick up a win there, you don't mind it.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think he's an interesting GPP play, excuse me, just because, like you said, there's really not much. He hasn't really done much this year. He's been injured a lot, and this Phillies offense really hasn't been that good. So I think he's in a decent spot here. He's definitely, for me, not safe in cash games just because he's again, you're not sure what you're going to get from him, but he could kind of have a nice little outing, and 4,900 is still pretty cheap that you could really put whatever you want for your hitters.
Yeah, definitely. And on the other side of this game, I mean, Jeremy Hellickson obviously coming off a really strong start against this Miami team, going 8 innings, 1 earned run, picked up the win and got 8 strikeouts. I mean, this is the 4th time that he's going to face Miami. I mean, it hasn't been all easy sailing, but he's been fairly consistent this year. I mean, kind of hasn't really had a ton of blow-up starts. The strikeout rate kind of hovers around 4 to 5 a game. Occasionally, he'll dial it up a little more. For me, I'm not quite sure he picks up a win here. Always with that Phillies offense backing him, it's kind of tough to predict. But, I mean, he's borderline kind of an SP2 play that I don't mind here.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, with the Marlins, their offense really hasn't shown too much, especially lately either. So I don't mind Hellickson in this matchup. Like you said, he's been really good lately. He's allowed 1 run in the last, or at least no more than 1 run in 4 of his last 5. So I like him here. His price tag kind of is just right for me. So I don't actually mind him in cash games. It's just I'm not 100% sold on him at this point.
Yeah, I think he's just one of those borderline plays. And on FanDuel, I mean, I'm not really looking at him. He's 7,300, but I kind of want to dive up maybe into that next tier of pricing to kind of maybe shore up some upside because I'm not quite sold that another 8 strikeout performance is going to be there. We don't usually see it too often with Hellickson.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you there. I know it is the Marlins, but he still could kind of get hit hard, and the price tag, especially on FanDuel, isn't really where you want it to be for just a mediocre performance.
Yeah. Cardinals and Mets here. Carlos Martinez, Noah Syndergaard, battle of really 2 top arms for their teams. Diving into Carlos Martinez first, I mean, I like the matchup a little bit better just because the Mets offense really hasn't been that great against right-handed pitching this year. I think you can look at Martinez and GPPs. Syndergaard, I think I kind of would rely on him a little bit more in GPPs, but just more so than Martinez.
Yeah, as weird as this sounds, I think Carlos Martinez actually might be viable for cash games. He's just been so solid lately, and like you said, this Mets offense really kind of stinks, and I just think he's in line to have one of those good outings, and his price tag really isn't too high for what he's projected to really do.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I mean, if we're talking on FanDuel, I think where that win is really important in getting those 12 points. It makes both these guys kind of GPP options. I mean, I like Aaron Sanchez for $100 more than Martinez, and I'd rather kind of spin up to Arrieta compared to Syndergaard there. So I think on DraftKings where that win's not really heavily weighted, I don't have a problem with either guy.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Thor is definitely for GPP just because he does have that huge strikeout potential. So I probably would stay away from him in cash games, but GPP is definitely.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Syndergaard, I mean, he leads the slate in strikeout percentage. I mean, 15% swinging strike rate. And you look at this Cardinals offense, I mean, they're a little bit banged up. I mean, I think you're kind of looking at that back half, and they're definitely a little bit different. They're less intimidating without Matt Carpenter.
Yeah, absolutely. They're missing a decent amount of people, so I really don't mind Thor in this matchup. Personally, I just think the Mets offense is really bad right now, so that's why I like Carlos Martinez a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. Tigers and Red Sox, next one here. Boston is favorites here, -144. Drew Pomeranz versus Justin Verlander. And both these guys are kind of at price tags that makes them unusable to me, even in GPPs, even in cash games. It's just not a really good matchup for both sides. And I just think at their price tags, I'm not quite sure there's enough upside or strikeout upside to kind of balance it out.
Yeah, I agree with you. First with Verlander, he's going up against the Red Sox offense, who I know have struggled at times, but they really sort of turned it around, except when they're facing Kyle Gibson. So I'm definitely staying away from Verlander here. And I think Pomeranz might actually have a pretty good outing. I think he's okay for GPPs, but his price tag is way too high. So I'm going to probably stay away from him in both.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, 10-3 on DraftKings is very expensive for, I mean, obviously a Tigers team that really hasn't blown the doors off left-handers, and they do have a fairly high strikeout rate. But you look at Pomeranz, I still think a little bit hesitant about the league change, and obviously heading into a ballpark that, it's a little bit more middle of the road in comparison to where he was pitching before.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I know in his first start, he did look really good through the first time in the order against the Giants. So I liked him in that. And then he kind of just lost everything after the long wait for when the Red Sox were scoring runs. So I don't know. I think against this Tigers team, even though they are a bunch of right-handed bats, I think he could have a good outing.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. I could see a quality start happening. To justify the price tag's my biggest thing.
No, I agree with you there. It's just way too high. I think it's okay maybe in GPPs, just because if you're able to put in a lineup that you like when you're doing the roster construction and you have enough for him, I think it would make sense to play him.
Yeah, definitely. And Pomeranz, his ceiling is relatively high. I mean, we've seen it this season where he's dialed up that 8 strikeout game and picked up a win, and he is a small favorite here.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at a lot of times when guys get traded, they have an adjustment period, like you said, different league. And just it takes them at least one, sometimes two starts to really work through that and start pitching, which they're usually capable of.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, kind of diving into Verlander, I think given his last few starts, you might you know, pop up on the radar for some people, given he's been over 30 DK points in 3 of the last 4. I think those were kind of a little bit more matchup dependent. I mean, you look at Minnesota, the Royals, and the Rays, not really a quality offense in comparison to the Sox.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Verlander's kind of an easy fade for me.
Yeah. Diamondbacks and Brewers here, Chase Anderson versus Braden Shipley. And Shipley, I mean, a top prospect there in Arizona, making his start against the Brewers. And I think there really is some strikeout upside here. I mean, he's really cheap. I mean, if you wanted to toss him in on FanDuel, I mean, he's 5,700. You could kind of stack whatever bet you wanted to. And even using him as an SP2 on DraftKings, I think there's some reasonable strikeout upside. I mean, he's shown it in the minor leagues. You look at this Brewers team that leads the league in strikeout rate against right-handed pitching. Obviously, it's not a good ballpark. Obviously, he is a small underdog, but I could see the Diamondbacks getting him some run support off Chase Anderson.
Yeah, I agree with you there. You look at Shipley, and a lot of times when they call up guys making their major league debut, there's really no video or tape on them, so they go out and have a decent outing. So if he doesn't have any restrictions pitch limit wise, and he kind of could be dealing against a majority of the righties in this Milwaukee Brewers lineup, so I don't mind him here. I'm definitely not playing him in cash, but I have no issues in GPPs.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you mentioned, I mean, first start, you kind of there's no tape, but you also don't know what you're going to get out of them as far as, we've seen it before. We've seen a handful of first starts this year for major league debuts, and you just get that a lot of emotions going through you. You kind of maybe walk a lot. A lot of guys are a little bit wild at times, and it takes a little bit to kind of come down. So there's always that wide range of outcomes that you can get from these guys who are starting for the first time.
Yeah, I agree with you there. But to me, playing Shipley at that low price tag kind of it makes a lot of sense in GPPs.
Yeah, definitely. And Chase Anderson on the other side, I'm not looking to use him. I know this Diamondbacks offense hasn't been great since the break, but against a right-hander like this, who's a reverse splits guy and facing a lot of those right-handers, even when you got Jake Lamb on the left side as well, it's a stay-away situation for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Anderson really isn't that bad of a pitcher, but for DFS purposes, he really doesn't offer too much value.
A's and Rangers, Martin Perez versus Daniel Mangden. And for me, I mean, this one's a stay away. I really like both these offenses in this matchup. And I think you got like a lot of the A's going up against Perez, who's really been struggling. And you got some of those A's bats who really hit left-handed pitching well.
Yeah, absolutely. Look at Perez. He has 3 straight negative performances on DK. So that's definitely a stay away. and there's a lot of righties in this lineup too that could do some damage. And then Megden, I think he just doesn't really offer too much of value, much like Anderson. So he could have a good outing, but it might be 5 innings, 3 runs or something, and it just doesn't really translate to DFS.
No, in that ballpark, I mean, that's a big downgrade for both these arms. I mean, you see the ball really fly off, especially during the summertime.
Yeah, when it starts heating up, you see a lot of balls leave Arlington Park. So,
yeah, definitely a stay away. Houston and New York, Michael Pineda, Dallas Keuchel, Houston -149 favorites. And Keuchel's been a guy who's kind of turned things around here. And he's going to get a pretty solid matchup against this Yankees team that 27th in WOBA against lefties. They don't strike out a ton, but I do think Keuchel can kind of flirt with that 4 to 5 strikeout mark, kind of where he's been for most of the season. I do think he's going to get a pretty quality start.
Yeah, absolutely. You look at Keuchel, and he's really struggled at the start of the year, but he's sort of come back to his usual pretty good effectiveness. And the Yankees have a lot of lefties. I know they can switch a few guys around, plug in some different players, but I just think Keuchel kind of dominates here. I know the ballpark isn't the best for him, but it's his own ballpark, and he's pitched pretty well there. And even if you go back to last season when this Yankees team was a little bit better, and even Keuchel was a little bit better, he really dominated them. So I definitely like Keuchel here. And then on the flip side with Pineda, I'm just staying far away. The Astros offense looks like they've really turned it around again, and they're kind of in the upswing. And then you look at Pineda, his last start was very good, so I think that's going to drive some ownership towards him, and that's absolutely not what I want to do.
I kind of don't mind Pineda as a deep GPP option. As you mentioned, I think there is going to be a little bit of an ownership buzz coming off that start against Baltimore. And as you mentioned, I mean, the Houston bats really are kind of heating up. We saw that. I mean, obviously, Tim Lincecum's not Michael Pineda, but you saw Houston bats really go off. And they are a deep offense. But I think you got to look at the Houston offense and think there could be some strikeout upside for Pineda here, given that the Astros strike out at a 24% rate against righties. But obviously, there is a very, very low floor for Pineda, as we saw earlier this season when Pineda threw against him.
No, absolutely. And his price tag is a little bit too high for me to really want to take that chance with him.
Moving on to the Cubs and White Sox, Jake Arrieta versus Miguel Gonzalez. Jake Arrieta, I mean, really struggled before the break. Definitely bounced back with a nice outing against the Mets. He's your most expensive option on the slate, and going up against a White Sox offense that really hasn't been that great this season. 24th in WOBA against right-handed pitching, 21% strikeout rate. I feel safe with Arrieta in all formats. I know he struggled a little bit on the road, and obviously US Cellular was a decent hitter's ballpark, but I think Arrieta kind of regains a nice stretch and kind of keeps it going.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I really don't mind Arrieta at all. I think he'll have a really good game. It's just his price tag is a little bit too high. I feel you could save a little bit of salary on both sides, dropping down a little bit. But I have no problems if you have that extra salary to play him.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, 10-6 isn't too bad on FanDuel. Yeah, I mean, the 12-4 is a little bit more intimidating on DraftKings.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 10-6 is kind of okay. It's typically where you're going to be at, but 12-4 is almost near like Scherzer level and stuff like that. And sometimes it's kind of hard to make a real lineup when you have to put another starting pitcher there that you have some confidence in.
Yeah, I mean, Arrieta, I mean, I think he kind of justifies that price tag. I mean, 23 or 26% strikeout rate, decent ground ball rate, and a big heavy favorite. I do expect him to kind of pick up the win.
Yeah, absolutely. And we look at this White Sox team, and they really don't do too much on the offensive side. I know that they have Justin Morneau, and they can go lefty, righty against you, but you throw a good right-handed pitcher there like Arrieta, and he could really dominate them.
Yeah, definitely. And on the other side of things, Miguel Gonzalez against this Cubs offense that's tremendously deep. Gonzalez has been a guy who I haven't really used, but he hasn't been bad at times because usually I am looking to pick on him. I mean, he's kind of your quality start guy, but on a full slate, I mean, there isn't really a ton of upside here.
Yeah, there's really no need to. And against this Cubs offense, it's just too dangerous of a team to really play him. I played Gonzalez, I think, once this year against the Red Sox, and that actually worked for my advantage. But it's just here, you definitely kind of want to stay away from him.
Yeah. Angels and Royals, next one here, Hector Santiago, Ian Kennedy. Hector Santiago had a couple nice starts before really blowing up in his last one. For me, I mean, Hector Santiago's not a guy I like to use. I know he's seen some upside, but you look at this Royals team, they have been better against lefties this year. They do rank inside the top 10. They don't strike out a ton. And I know Kauffman Stadium's a decent ballpark, but once again, I mean, during the summertime, the ball kind of carries a little bit more, and Santiago's extremely home run prone.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. Both starters actually for me are just stay away just because they're both fly ball pitchers and they could get into a decent amount of trouble against both these offenses. So I know they both have some upside, and I could totally see someone playing in the GPPs because they are priced nicely, but I just don't expect them to have really good outings.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, Kennedy's a guy who I could see throwing a quality start. But given the Angels just have like a 16% strikeout rate against right-handed pitching, they don't offer a ton of upside. And the only times I really use pitchers against the Angels is if those guys are just strictly dominant strikeout pitchers, and Kennedy's not one of those guys.
No, absolutely. Both these guys really mimic themselves, and they're going to give up a lot of fly balls. And we've seen even at Kauffman Stadium, balls can go out, and like you said, starting to get a little bit hotter, heating up now, and it's going to be a lot of offense probably in this game.
Yeah. Reds and Giants, Jake Peavy versus Anthony Desclafani. And these offenses, I mean, Giants have kind of taken a step backwards. They were in a lot of good spots on this road trip and a lot of good ballparks and kind of failed to make anything of it. They're very cheap here in this matchup against Desclafani. And I don't know. I mean, I kind of really just want to stay away as far as pitchers here.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there. Obviously, we're not going to play Jake Peavy just because he's Jake Peavy and can get hit around pretty hard. The only really good thing in this matchup is just the ballpark factor, which kind of makes it a little bit hard because I'd obviously stay away from both pitchers. But since this game is at Giants AT&T Park, I would play DeSclafani. I think in GPPs. I mean, like you said, the Giants offense really hasn't shown too much. Going back home in a very, very good pitcher's park. I think it's going to be a very low scoring game.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, I'm not looking at Peavy, and this Reds offense, I mean, has really come out of the second half gates here, really hitting the ball well. And I always, you kind of looked at that front five and said it was always still there, that the offense could happen. And I think given that Votto's heating up, you always got Jay Bruce and Duvall, and now that Billy Hamilton's getting on base and causing havoc, I don't think the Reds are kind of that easy pushover team that they were in the first half. I think you're going to be a little less hesitant to just kind of deploy average arms against them.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I think the whole dynamic of that team offense is starting to change. Now you have Billy Hamilton up there. So I definitely think they're trending upwards. And when you have mediocre pitchers like PV, you absolutely just got to stay away from them.
Yeah, so I think Desclafani, I mean, he could be in line for a quality start. My issue is the 9,300 price tag. It's a little high for me. I kind of wish he was sitting down to maybe that 8K range. I'd feel a little bit more comfortable using him there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I don't mind him, though, on FanDuel at 7,500. So that kind of makes you think, especially in GPPs. But I kind of agree with you. 9,300 is a little crazy talk for DraftKings.
Yeah, and Desclafani, I mean, been relatively solid, pitching deep into games, and the strikeout rate has been there. So at FanDuel, I can definitely see 7,500 using him and kind of stacking some bats around him.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree. You can do a lot of things, 7,500 for your pitcher on FanDuel. So I hate to say it, but he's almost borderline cash save, but I don't feel 100% comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah, I could definitely see using him. I mean, just given that cheap price tag.
Yeah, absolutely. You throw him in, and he gets another 30-point outing on there, and heck, maybe he gets the win. PV has a bad outing, so he could get an easy win. Who knows?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know the Giants are favorites, but I'm with you. I think this game should be closer to a pick 'em than people realize.
Yeah, absolutely. This Giants offense really is been a little lackluster lately, especially coming out since the All-Star break. So I really don't mind DeSclafani.
Yeah, definitely. That's going to wrap things up here with the pitcher nail down. Be sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.